Do you think for yourself? And what does that process even look like? Today, we are going to explore being impressionable and critical thinking and why it is so important to build critical thinking skills and make your own opinions about the things that you are seeing in the world. So, hello everyone, welcome back to Mindset Matters. My name is Victoria, your host, and I'm very excited to be chatting with you again today. Before we jump into it, exciting announcement, it is officially launch week of the Mindset Mastery course. If you want to take advantage of launch week pricing, you can book a free discovery call with me. Links are below, as well as the link for a full description of the course if you haven't checked it out yet. Very excited. And again, there's limited space to snag launch pricing, so take advantage of it while you can, and I can't wait to help you change your life. So we're going to talk about being impressionable and critical thinking today. My initial thoughts. I see myself as a critical thinker. However, I've also seen myself as someone who's been quite impressionable in the past. I am the type of person who often takes my friends' advice. Or in the past, I've definitely seen instances where I've followed the crowd, maybe saying yes to suggestions made to me before really taking the time to think about things for myself. And I think it used to be more relevant, but it is still there. And so I kind of want to explore today, what does it mean to be impressionable? What sources of suggestion exist in our lives? How to build critical thinking skills, and kind of how grounding yourself in presence is really important for taking the time to discover your own voice, your own motivations, your own values. So my definition of being impressionable would be kind of like blindly following advice, or following advice given without really thinking about it too much. So maybe you see someone you like or you admire doing something, so you want to do it too, right? This is huge in influencer culture. You are making decisions based on other people's opinions rather than your own. So maybe you see your favorite influencer share a hair product that they've been using. You go out and buy it without doing any research on the product, without even knowing, do they have similar hair type than me? Does it actually work, or was it just an ad? There's all these different things and layers to this, but that's one example of, hey, I see someone doing something, so I want to do it too. Now, Google's definition of being impressionable is easily influenced because of a lack of critical ability. That to me sounds a little bit harsh, lack of critical ability. So you're not critical thinking, essentially, right? You're easily influenced by what's happening based on suggestions given. And why is this a problem? Well, I feel like we don't always realize if what we're doing is actually serving us. Is it good for us? Is it actually what we want to be doing? And we sometimes see that in hindsight, but in the moment, we aren't really paying attention to that factor. So I want to give you an example. So last year, I was catching up with a friend, and we started talking about dating. Now, this friend is in a relationship. I am not. And I was expressing that I was kind of done with dating apps, and I was really happy. I'm living my life, doing my thing, not feeling a type of way about not dating. I've really just been in my own happy place. And that friend suggested to me, she goes, now it's winter time. Winter's a good time to be on the apps. You're not really going out as much. That could be a good place to meet someone. And so that was her suggestion, that I go back on the apps, even though I just expressed that I'm good and I don't want to be. And if you've seen my recent podcast about dating apps, I feel strongly about not enjoying them, and that's my personal preference, my personal decision. But what did I do? I downloaded a dating app that night. Yep, that night, just because my friend basically told me I should. Why? I probably was on there for a day, and then I was like, wait, what the heck am I doing? And, breaking this down, it's why did I do that? I was literally expressing to this friend that I was happy. And yet my friend suggested I do this. I guess she wasn't really listening to what I had to say, or she just, was giving her own opinion, which is fine. But it's why did I do that? And this is why this topic's so interesting to me, because I do feel like we get influenced and, we're impressionable more than we actually think. So I want to break down a few different sources of impression or suggestion in our lives. So, of course, friends. Okay, I think friends might be the most influential people because they're people we already trust. When you trust someone, their opinion is going to be held to a higher value than someone random, right? So I think when a friend makes a suggestion, if you really trust this person, you might think like, oh, maybe they know best, or maybe I should try this. And again, maybe that's just me not having a backbone with certain things. And I'm getting better at this, and I'm happy this is something I've noticed. And this is why I want to talk about this, because I think we can also go through periods where we're not really realizing how impressionable we're being until you kind of take a step back and you're like, wait, I did not think for myself in that moment. Like, had I just reflected on what she said and said, yeah, like, thanks for the suggestion, but I'm good, I would have carried on knowing that that's not something that I wanted to do instead of doing it. You know what I mean? Like, what? I don't know why I did that. Okay. Another source of like impression or suggestion, when we talk to strangers, okay, are you ever in like a public place where someone makes kind of like a comment and then they laugh? So then you kind of laugh along without really thinking about what they said. Like, that's another one where I'm like, why do we do this? Like, I've been in some pretty almost like uncomfortable situations where a stranger will say something like kind of out of pocket or like super like not appropriate, and they kind of laugh, so you kind of are like, haha, okay, and then you walk away. But it's like, wait, but why did I laugh along? And I think this is something we have to be really careful about, because this is kind of like bystander culture too, of like not doing something or not standing up when something is not right. But sometimes in those moments we don't know how to react, so we just like laugh along. Or it's like when you don't hear what someone says, you kind of like do a little chuckle and then you're continue on your way. I don't know. That just boggles my mind. Like, there's got to be some psychology behind this. I'm sure there is. I didn't really do research about that one, but I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Okay, the next one is social media and influencers, which I touched on. You know, if there's an influencer or someone on social media that you really trust or that you really admire, you're really going to be impressionable to their suggestions. I mentioned the example earlier of just like buying something because an influencer talks about it, right? Companies put so much money into influencers these days just because they have such a hold on their audience, and a lot of big influencers, like, their audience will buy every single thing that they suggest. So it's just an interesting phenomenon of like, you're just in a way blindly following these people, right? Like, I feel like I have a few friends who are very into like influencer culture, and they're like, oh my gosh, this person does it, like, I'm buying it. And I feel like I'm personally less influenced by social media and influencers. However, I think it's interesting, like, you should take a step back to be like, okay, do I actually need this product? Is this something that I even want? Or do I only want it and feel like I need it because this person that I adore has it? You know what I mean? Another source of impression and suggestion, the news and media. And this is kind of a scary one. I feel like there's certain things about this I don't even want to talk about, but I just think you have to be so careful about what you see and hear in the news, in the media. Even the fact that there's this TikTok ban on the horizon, like, that to me, I don't know. There's just a lot of crazy things that are happening, and I think we need to be very, very critical when it comes to what type of information is being fed to us, and, you know, make sure that you are trying to look up news sources that are the least biased. Does that even exist? I don't know. I feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but news and media is a big one. Another source of suggestion would be like your family and even your own belief system, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people do things because their parents told them to, because their family has always done things that way because they kind of want to just follow what is the path that's laid out for them, I guess. And, I think it can be challenging to navigate family and having like different, when your family has maybe different opinions on certain things than you do. I think that can be challenging to navigate. But again, it's about creating space to think for yourself, essentially. And I do want to talk about The Power of the Subconscious Mind, which is a book by Joseph Murphy. And he talks about the power of suggestion. And he essentially talks about how suggestion is essentially when a thought or idea is placed into someone's mind and then there's action taken on that. And your subconscious mind will actually take everything that is said literally. So if you talk about yourself negatively, your subconscious mind is forming that belief over time. So one example from the book I want to touch on is, let's say you're a new passenger on a boat and you happen to see someone who looks like it's their first time ever sailing, okay? You walk up to that person and you tell them, ooh, you're not looking so good. You look really pale. You look like you're going to be sick. That person is more likely to start feeling seasickness because you suggested it to them. Why? Because they're in this impressionable state of they've never sailed before. It is possible that they get seasickness, but you suggesting it to them in their subconscious is actually creating a higher likelihood of them feeling those symptoms of seasickness. But if you're on the same boat, you go to the sailor and you say, yeah, you're looking a little sick. You're not looking too good. He's probably going to not take it seriously because, he sails all the time. So for him, seasickness is just not even a thing. It's not even an issue, right? So that's the power of suggestion. The sailor knows better and he's more likely to be a critical thinker in that setting because he's comfortable in that setting. Whereas someone who is more impressionable, it's their first time, they look a little nervous, it's so easy to slide in and make a suggestion. So I want to touch on types of behavior where being impressionable is maybe more likely. And I think this could be with things like partying or following the crowd. So if you're out and everybody is engaging in a certain activity, you're more likely to also kind of follow along. And that could be something like drinking. That could be something, even just playing certain games at a party. I don't know, there's certain things that in those settings, you're more impressionable to say yes to certain things. This could also be peer pressure, which I don't want to say peer pressure is completely different, but I do feel like peer pressure tends to feel a bit icky. Yeah, actually, let's talk about this. So peer pressure to me is someone's kind of trying to get you to do something and it feels maybe wrong. Your intuition is telling you this isn't right. And yet maybe you engage, maybe you don't, okay? But when I think about being impressionable, it's almost more under the radar, right? It's like influencer culture. You see something, you get excited. You're not listening to your intuition that's telling you, no, don't spend that money, you don't need it, because you have a positive rapport with the person you're being influenced by. And I think that's why I was so impressionable with my friend, was she suggested something and I'm well, I see her really highly. I value her opinion. And I do think she has, she's a very intelligent person, whatever. So her suggesting that to me made me kind of think, well, maybe I should try it again. And again, that was this moment of well, I trust her, so I guess I'll try it. Right? Whereas peer pressure, I feel it feels wrong. When you're being peer pressured or you see peer pressure happening, it feels wrong. And I think that is something a little bit different. Even on this topic, we could think about being a bystander in certain situations, right? If you witness something that is wrong, bullying behavior, racism, it can be uncomfortable to do the right thing. But I think it's so important to have critical thinking in that moment and realize no, I need to either stand up for this and I need to remove myself from this situation, right? And this makes me think of an example in teaching. There was a TED Talk I watched and a direct example of this happening in my own teaching practice. But the TED Talk was all about why it's so important for teachers not to shy away from like tough conversations. So, especially when working with young people, like the example I can give is if a student says something racist and the teacher is like, oh my goodness, what do I do? There's like this awkward moment where the class is like looking around. The teacher has two options. She can either address it, he or she can address the situation and be like, look, we need to talk about why this type of comment is not okay and how it's harmful and hurtful. And that's a teachable moment, right? Or the teacher can kind of scold the student and sweep it under the rug. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. And I think it's so important that we don't shy away from those types of conversations. And this can happen in different settings, not just in, teacher student type of setting. But I do think it's really important to be open to not shying away from these tough conversations, because why? Everyone is going to learn a lesson from that. And maybe if you're around a bunch of adults and someone says something, be the person to say, whoa, like that's not cool. Like that's not an okay comment. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good sign that that is not someone you probably want to be around. But I think with the example of having these tough conversations, like that really leads us to thinking about critical thinking. So that's what I want to talk about next. Having critical thinking skills and just being mindful of what you see, what you hear, how things are leaving an impression on you, I think is so, so important, especially now in our society where so much is done online. There's so much, AI that is doing crazy things. I saw something on TikTok the other day. There was an AI tool or an AI generated video where it was literally using this girl's face. It was just not her voice. But the video looked like her talking about something. And she came out to be like, oh my goodness, I saw this and was mortified. This is not me. But it looks exactly like me. So the fact that not only are like people's voices being taken, but people's, faces are being taken, and then they're talking about things that they didn't even say, like that can be so dangerous and really, I don't know, it's just scary. So I feel like you have to be so critical about what you see online. And even with my podcast, like I try to always come from a place of being open-minded. I know that my experiences are different than other people's. And I totally understand that people are going to have different opinions than me. And that's fine. That is okay. I think for me, I'm always open to engaging with people in conversation. And I appreciate constructive criticism. I appreciate people saying, hey, I didn't agree with this because, and they explain. That's totally fine, because that shows me that that's the type of person who has critical thinking skills. They're thinking about what I'm saying and they're able to say, maybe I don't fully agree with this. Or maybe I like what you said, but I wish you gave more detail. Or whatever that is. Like that's critical thinking, and that's great. And I think that's really important. Whether you leave a comment or not, sharing your thoughts, you should be able to listen to something and think, how could this maybe apply to my life? And what does this concept look like for me? You're not going to have the same example as me with my friend. It's going to look something different. Maybe you aren't super into influencer culture, but every time you see a celebrity doing something, a favorite celebrity, you tend to hop on that bandwagon, right? So it's going to look different for everyone. And I think it's important to recognize that, like, hey, I'm sharing my experiences and I'm coming from a place of knowing that not everyone is going to share the exact same lifestyle and experience as me. So I just want to say that. But another thing I want to mention with critical thinking is I really do think it's impossible not to be influenced at all by what's around us. Like, it's not a bad thing to seek advice from friends, and it's not a bad thing to want people's opinions. I think it's great to get other people's opinions. But the problem is to accept that opinion without really thinking about what it means for you. I do want to talk really quick about presence. You guys know that presence is a huge part of my life, and since adopting presence and learning to just exist, to just be without thinking so much about things past and future, right? Just being in the moment is something that I think is so important for everyone. And I will recommend him every single time I talk about presence. But Eckhart Tolle is my favorite kind of spiritual teacher on this topic. So I would highly recommend checking him out. But to me, grounding yourself in presence is allowing yourself to kind of step away from the issue at hand, or step away from, these outside sources that are suggesting things to you, and allowing yourself just to exist. And when you give yourself moments of just stillness and peace, and you bring that in throughout your day, you're more likely to kind of discover your own motivations, your own values, your own voice around these things. Because when we're just go, 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 right? We see something, we're like, wow, I want that. We go and we do it. And we don't think at all about what it actually means. If I actually need this thing, is it actually useful to me? That's me not really being present with myself. So I think separating yourself from social media, taking breaks, getting outside for a walk, going out in nature, dance to your favorite song, like anything that can kind of get you into a positive emotional state and allow you to almost ground and like recenter yourself, is a great way to be like, do I actually want to take this advice, or this, or how does this advice actually relate to my life? There's so much noise in the world. There's so many sources of people telling us what they think. And I think that that's beautiful that people are able to share their opinion, but I also think it's just important that you have your own and that you discover like what that actually means for you. So I think that's all I have for you today. I'm going to leave this here. I would love for you to leave me a comment. What do you think about this topic? Are there times in your life where you've been more impressionable? Is it something that you still struggle with? Are you the opposite and you're kind of wary of people's advice? Because I know that the opposite can be true, and people can be, not very willing to take other people's advice. That's an interesting one as well. So I'm going to leave it here. I hope you have a beautiful day. And don't forget to check out the link below if you want to book a little discovery call with me. I would love to work with you. Have a good one.